I am Ali, faithful recorder of the extraordinary deeds of Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the autumn of 1892, fate drew us to the desolate moors of Yorkshire, where the village of Whitmore trembled beneath a sinister shadow. Legend whispered of a beast, a curse born of the howling night hand. It fell to Holmes to pierce the veil of fear. What follows is a tale of dread and discovery, one I have set down as the curse of the Moorland Beast. Attend well, for truth lurks within the darkness. It was a crisp autumn morning in 1892, and the familiar comforts of 2-1B Baker Street were bathed in the soft glow of the hearth. The leaves outside had begun their annual descent, carpeting the pavement in hues of gold and crimson, while a faint mist clung to the windows, hinting at the chill beyond. I was seated in my usual armchair, idly perusing the Daily Telegraph, while my friend and colleague, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, lounged opposite me. His long fingers were steepled beneath his chin, and his keen eyes gazed thoughtfully into the flickering flames, as though seeking answers in their dance. The tranquility of the room was broken by the distant chime of the doorbell, followed by the soft tread of Mrs. Hudson ascending the stairs. She appeared at the threshold, a small calling card in her hand and a curious glint in her eye. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced. "A Mrs. Elena Smith from Yorkshire. She seems in quite a state, poor dear." "Show her in, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes said, "and perhaps bring a pot of tea. I suspect our visitor may be in need of it." As Mrs. Hudson bustled away, I set aside my newspaper and rose to my feet, intrigued by the prospect of a new case. Moments later, our visitor entered, and I found myself face to face with a woman of middle years, her countenance pale and drawn. She was dressed in the sombre attire of mourning, her black bonnet framing a face etched with sorrow. Her hands, clutching a damp handkerchief, trembled visibly as she hesitated at the doorway. "Pray, come in, Mrs. Smith," Holmes said, his voice gentle yet commanding. "I'm Sherlock Holmes, and this is my associate, Dr. Watson. Please take a seat by the fire. You look quite chilled from your journey." She nodded gratefully and crossed the room, sinking into the armchair with a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. It has been a long and weary trip from Whitmore, and I fear my nerves are quite frayed." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes studying her with that peculiar intensity which so often unnerved those unaccustomed to his methods. "You have come from Yorkshire, then a village near the moors, I presume, given the traces of peat on your boots and the faint scent of heather about. Your person—" Mrs. Smith blinked in surprise. "Why, yes, sir. Whitmore lies on the edge of the moors, a quiet place, or at least it wasn't till recently." I could not help but smile at Holmes's small display of deduction, a habit which never failed to impress both clients and myself. Mrs. Hudson returned with a tray of tea, and after a steaming cup had been pressed into Mrs. Smith's hands, Holmes gestured for her to begin her account. "Now, Mrs. Smith," he said, "tell us what brings you to Baker Street. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem, for in such matters the smallest thread may unravel the entire scene." She took a sip of tea, steadying herself, and then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "It is my husband, Mr. Holmes. Henry was found dead 3 days ago, and the manner of his passing it was ghastly, sir, beyond anything I could have imagined." Holmes's brow furrowed slightly. "Pray continue. We are farmers. You see us are most in Whitmore. 2 weeks ago, a neighbour, John Carter, was found dead in his field. His throat was torn out as if by some savage beast, and his livestock cows and sheep alike were slaughtered in the same brutal fashion. The villagers were shaken, but the constable assured us it was the work of a rabid dog or perhaps a wolf strayed from the hills. She paused, her hands tightening around the teacup. Then, not 5 days later, another farmer, William Drake, met the same fate. His body was discovered in his barn, the door splintered and clawed. His wounds, though, they were terrible. Mr. Holmes's, though inflicted by fangs and claws. And now, my Henry found in our own barn, just as the others. I leaned forward. My curiosity piqued. Were there any witnesses to these attacks? None that I know of, she replied. Each death occurred at night, and the victims were alone. The villagers are terrified, Mr. Holmes. Many speak of leaving their homes, abandoning the land their families have tended for generations. Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. And what did the local authorities make of it? The constable insists it is an animal, but he is as baffled as the rest of us. Yet there is something else, something the villagers whisper of in hushed tones. They speak of an old legend, curse upon the moors. It is said that long ago, a vengeful spirit was bound to the land, taking the form of a monstrous wolf, to punish those who dwelled there. Werewolf, Mr. Holmes. Holmes's expression remained impassive, though I detected a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. And what do you believe, Mrs. Smith? Are you inclined to credit such tales? She shook her head, though uncertainty clouded her eyes. I am a practical woman, so not given to superstition. But the full moon marked each attack, and the wounds they are not like those of any creature I have ever seen. The villagers are convinced it is the beast of legend, and I confess I know not what to think. Holmes leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. Tell me more of this legend. What is its origin? Mrs. Smith took a deep breath. It is said that centuries ago a cruel lord ruled these lands, tormenting his tenants and driving them to ruin. One night, a grieving father, a man whose family had been destroyed by the lord's greed, cursed him before taking his own life. The lord was found dead the next full moon, his body mangled as if by a wild beast. Since then, it is believed that the spirit of the wolf returns to exact vengeance on those who dwell upon the moor. A chilling tale, I remarked, though surely a product of folklore rather than fact. Perhaps, Holmes said thoughtfully, and yet it is curious that the attacks coincide with the Luna Sokola detail. No doubt that our culprit has exploited to lend credence to the legend. Mrs. Smith's eyes widened. You believe it to be the work of a man, then? Holmes smiled enigmatically. I deal in facts, Mrs. Smith, not phantoms. But rest assured, I shall uncover the truth, whatever it may be. Now, is there anything else you can tell us? Any detail, however small, may prove significant. She hesitated, then spoke in a hushed tone. There is one thing, though it may be nothing. Each of the farmers who died had recently spoken of. Strange noises near their homes, howls in the night, and the sound of something large moving through the gorse. Henry himself heard it just days before. Her voice trailed off. Holmes nodded gravely. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Your account has been most illuminating. Will you help us, Mr. Holmes? She pleaded, her voice trembling with hope. I fear that if this terror continues, Whitmore will be lost or worse. Holmes rose to his feet, his decision made. Fear not, Mrs. Smith. Dr. Watson and I shall accompany you to Whitmore at once. This mystery, with its blend of legend and bloodshed, intrigues me greatly. We shall leave by the afternoon train. A look of profound relief washed over her face. Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes, thank you. As she departed to make arrangements for our journey, I turned to Holmes, my mind already racing with questions. "What do you make of it, Holmes? Surely you do not give credence to this talk of werewolves?" Holmes chuckled softly, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "My dear Watson, you know my methods. I seek the rational, not the supernatural. Yet, it is clear that someone or something is using this legend to their advantage. The full moon timing, the savage nature of the attacks, the fear gripping the village all point to a calculated effort to exploit superstition. A human hand is at work here, Watson, and I intend to unmask it." With that, he reached for his pipe, and I knew that his remarkable mind was already sifting through the threads of the mystery. Did I know that the moors of Whitmore held secrets darker and more dangerous than any legend could foretell? The train that bore us to Whitmore wound its way through an ever wilder landscape. The pastoral fields of the south gave way to the stark, untamed beauty of the Yorkshire moors. As we stepped onto the platform of the small, windswept station, the sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. A chill wind swept across the open expanse, carrying with it the faint, mournful cry of a curlew sound that seemed to echo the desolation of the place. A horse-drawn cart awaited us, its driver a stooped figure wrapped in a threadbare coat, his face weathered by years of exposure to the moorland gales. He offered no greeting beyond a curt nod, and we climbed aboard in silence. The creak of the wheels blended with the rustle of gorse as we trundled along a narrow track. The fog was creeping in, now thick and clammy, curling around the twisted trees and blotting out the distant hills. By the time the grey stone houses of Whitmore came into view, the world had shrunk to a dim, shrouded haze. Charming. Indeed, I muttered, pulling my scarf tighter against the damp. Holmes, his sharp eyes scanning the mist, replied softly, "It is a stage set for tragedy, Watson. The isolation, the fog, the perfect canvas for fear to paint its wildest fancies. The village inn rose before Usa, sturdy relic of weathered stone, crowned with a sagging thatch. Its sin, swaying in the wind, bore the faded outline of a wolf's head. Its jaws parted in a silent snarl, grim omen that set my nerves on edge. We descended from the cart, and the driver, without a word, urged his horse onward, vanishing into the fog as though eager to be rid of us. The inn's interior offered a stark contrast to the bleakness without a low-ceilinged room warmed by a crackling fire. Its walls lined with dark oak beams and hung with tarnished brass. The innkeeper, a stout man with a florid face and a grizzled beard, bustled forward as we entered. "Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson, I take it," he said, his voice rough but tinged with a wary curiosity. "I'm Billings. Welcome to the Wolf's Head. Mrs. Smith said you'd be coming about the troubles." "Indeed," Holmes replied, signing the leather-bound register with a flourish. "We are here to investigate the recent deaths. Tell me, Mr. Billings, what is the mood of the village?" Billings wiped his hands on his apron, his eyes darting toward the handful of patrons hunched over their pints by the hearth. "Mood, it's terror, so plain and simple. 3 men, dead good men, 2 and their beasts torn apart like so much chaff. The folk here say it's the werewolf come back to claim its due." He lowered his voice, leaning closer. "My old grand used to tell tales of a tay beast born of a curse, stalking the moor under the full moon. We laughed at it once, but now, well, you'll hear the howls yourself." Holmes's expression remained impassive, though I caught the faintest flicker of amusement in his eyes. A compelling tale, no doubt. We shall require a room and a meal, something warm, if you please. Our work begins at first light. The room assigned to us was a cramped affair, its sloping ceiling and small leaded window lending it a claustrophobic air. 2 narrow beds stood against the walls, their mattresses sagging beneath threadbare quilts, and a single candle cast long shadows across the uneven floorboards. As we unpacked our modest belongings, I gazed out at the village square now, little more than a blur in the thickening fog. Hardly the Ritz, I remarked. But it will serve, Holmes said, arranging his pipe and tobacco on the rickety table. He smiled faintly. Comfort is a small price to pay for intrigue, Watson. There is a puzzle here, and I mean to solve it. The next morning broke grey and dreary, a fine drizzle pattering against the windowpane. After a breakfast of thick porridge and kippers, served with a side of Billings's muttered warnings about the moor, we set out for the farm of the late Henry Smith. Mrs. Smith met us at the inn's door, her face pale but resolute beneath her widow's bonnet. "It's not far," she said, leading us along a muddy path that wound past huddled cottages and barren fields. "I pray you can find some answers, Mr. Holmes." The farm lay in a shallow hollow, its stone walls weathered and moss. The barn, a gaunt silhouette against the overcast sky, had its door hanging crookedly, the upper hinge shattered as we stepped inside. A faint metallic temps lingered in the air, the remnant of bloodshed. "Here," Mrs. Smith said, her voice trembling as she pointed to a dark stain on the straw-strewn floor. "This is where I found Henry." Holmes knelt beside the spot, his long fingers brushing the straw as he examined the stain. "And the door was it thus when you discovered him?" "Yes," she replied, clawed and broken, as if something monstrous had forced its way through. "Look at the mark, steep as a man's finger and jagged." I approached the door, running, my hand over the splintered wood. The gouges were indeed ferocious, raking downward in long parallel lines. Could this be the work of a bear, perhaps? I ventured. Holmes shook his head, his brow furrowed. "No bear roams these moors, Watson. The force is impressive, yet the regularity of the scratches suggests something else, a tool, perhaps wielded with intent." He rose and stepped outside, his keen eyes scanning the sodden ground. After a moment, he beckoned me over. "See here, Prince." Human boots, blurred by the mud, and beside them the faint outline of a portage, but indistinct. Mrs. Smith wrung her hands. "The villagers call them the werewolf's tracks. They won't come near this place now. Not even the children will fetch water from the stream." Holmes offered her a reassuring nod. "We shall unravel this, Mrs. Smith. Fear thrives on ignorance, and I intend to banish both." Our next visit was to the farm of John Carter, a mile distant. His widow, Mrs. Margaret Carter, greeted us at the gate, her stern features softened by grief. She led us to the field, where her husband had fallen, a bleak patch of earth bordered by a crumbling wall. The remains of several sheep lay scattered about, their wool matted with dried blood, their throats gashed open with surgical precision. Holmes bent to examine one of the carcasses, his fingers probing the wounds. "These are not the haphazard tears of a wild beast," he murmured. "The cuts are clean, deliberate always, the throat. This is no rabid dog, Watson. Could it be a trained animal?" I suggested, recalling tales of circus beasts turned rogue. "Possibly," he replied, his tone thoughtful. "Or a man, with a clever disguise. Note the absence of struggle. These sheep were taken swiftly, silently." As we turned to leave, a horseman approached, his figure cutting through the mist with an air of authority. He was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in a tailored riding coat, and his sharp features bore the stamp of privilege. Dismounting, he strode toward us, a riding crop tucked under his arm. "Mr. Holmes, I presume," he said, extending a gloved hand. "Reginald Hawthorne. Mrs. Smith mentioned you'd come poking about." Holmes shook his hand, his gaze steady. "Mr. Hawthorne, you're a landowner here, I take it." "The largest in Whitmore," Hawthorne replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "I've been trying to drag this village into the modern age. Roads, machinery, but these farmers cling to their plots like drowning men to driftwood. And now, with these deaths, some may be more inclined to sell," Holmes observed, his tone neutral. "And yet it is curious timing, is it not?" Hawthorne's eyes flickered briefly. "A few have come round. Fears are a fine persuader. But I'll not have you thinking I'm behind this, Mr. Holmes. I'm no butcher. I deal in contracts, not corpses." "Naturally," Holmes said smoothly. "Yet it is curious timing, nothing more. I've business to attend. Good day to you." He remounted and spurred his horse away, leaving a plume of mist in his wake. "Pleasant chap," I remarked, watching him disappear. Holmes's lips twitched. Ambitious, certainly, and perhaps too eager to protest his innocence. But we shall see, Watson. That evening, we returned to the Wolf's Head, where the fire roared against the growing chill. The common room was sparsely filled. The villagers gathered in tight knots, their voices hushed with dread. I caught fragments of their talk, predictions of another attack with the full moon 2 nights hence. Billings approached with a tray of steaming stew, his face grave. "Mark my words, Sitt'll strike again. The beast don't rest when the moon's full." As if in answer, a long guttural howl rose from the moor, echoing through the night like a harbinger of doom. The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire, and I felt a shiver creep up my spine. Holmes, puffing contentedly on his pipe, seemed unmoved. "A fine performance," he murmured. "But who?" "What do you make of it, Holmes?" I asked, lowering my voice. "An animal or something more?" He exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes fixed on the flames. "The evidence mounts, Watson, but it is not yet clear. Tomorrow we visit the Drake farm and probe deeper into this village's secrets. I suspect the truth will prove less fantastical than the villagers farand, more sinister than they imagine." With that, he rose and retired, leaving me to contemplate the howling wind and the shadows that seemed to press ever closer. The drizzle had ceased by mid-morning, leaving the air thick with moisture and the mud and paths treacherous with mud. Sherlock Holmes and I departed the Wolf's Head with purpose, our boots grinding against the gravel as we headed for William Drake's farm, the latest sight in Whitmore's string of gruesome deaths. The sky loomed grey and oppressive, pierced only by the fleeting shadow of a raven, while a mournful wind wailed across the moor as if lamenting the violence below. Drake's farm crouched a half-mile beyond the village, its fields hemmed by a tumble-down stone wall relics of forgotten hands. The scene greeted us with familiar devastation. A barn door clawed and splintered, a scattering of sheep strewn across the frosty pasture, their wool matted with dark drying blood. A wiry farmhand, barely 17, lingered by the gate, his pallid face taut as he gripped a pitchfork. "You're the London men, then?" he called, his voice trembling with unease. "I'm Tom Griggs. Mrs. Drake's inside, but she ain't herself, sir." Holmes nodded briefly. "Thank you, Tom. We'll speak with her shortly. Were you present when Mr. Drake was attacked?" The lad shook his head fiercely. No, sir. It were night. I'd gone to me mess. Found him at dawn by the barn. Looked like some wicked thing had torn him apart. Holmes's eyes sharpened, but he offered no reply, stepping past Tom to inspect the barn. I trailed him, noting the deep gashes in the wood, mirroring those at the Smith and Carter farms and a faint sour whiff of decay. "Observe, Watson," he said, gesturing me nearer. "The scratches are deep, but see their uniformity for parallel lines, evenly spaced. A beast's claws would scatter chaotically, yet these suggest control." I squinted at the gouges. A tool again, then designed to imitate claws. "Exactly," he said, standing, and the angle slanted downward as from a man's height. A creature would strike lower. "This is no werewolf, Watson, but a cunning ruse." He paused, sniffing near the straw. "A trace of oil," he remarked, then shrugged. "Likely the farmhand's tools." He plucked a rusted hinge from the floor, slipping it into his pocket without elaboration. Before I could press him, the farmhouse door groaned open, revealing Mrs. Draker, sturdy woman, her grey hair bound beneath a shawl. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her hands wringing a damp cloth around a silver locket her husband's, I guessed. She shuffled toward us, her gait heavy with sorrow. "You're Mr. Holmes," she rasped. "Alina Smith said you'd come." "I don't know what." "You'll find, sir, but it's the beast. Took my William, like it took the rest." Holmes inclined his head gently. "We seek the truth, Mrs. Drake. May we examine the site?" She waved a tired hand toward the barn. "Look all you like. Ain't nothing left but blood and ruin." Holmes circled the barn, magnifying glass in hand. He paused at a muddy patch, studying boot prints tangled with larger, blurred marks, perhaps canine. He scraped mud into a vial, then turned to the sheep, probing a wound with a slender tool from his coat. "Consistent," he muttered. "A single, precise tear at the throat, no ripping or goring." This was swift, deliberate an execution, not a feast. "Execution," I said, startled. "You think these killings are targeted?" "Not necessarily targeted, Watson," he replied, his face unreadable but intentional. "There's method hair mind behind the madness." Leaving Mrs. Drake to her mourning, we returned to the village, determined to probe its residents. The wolf's head hummed with subdued chatter. As we entered, farmers and labourers hunched over their ale. Mr. Billings approached with bread and cheese, his brow creased with worry. "Any progress, sir?" he asked, placing the tray before us. "They're saying tomorrow's full moon will bring another death. Village is jittery as a cat." Holmes carved a sliver of cheese with his pocket knife, his tone offhand. "What do the locals say beyond this werewolf yarn, Mr. Billings? Any feuds or rivalries that might turn bloody?" Billings faltered, casting a wary glance around. "There's been whispers. John Carter sacked a farmhand, Thomas Griggs's brother month back. Lad vowed revenge. Henry Smith caught a poacher on his land, had a right row over it. But that's common enough. Don't mean murder." "Perhaps not," Holmes mused. "But it's a thread to pull. And the gentry anyone prominent." Billings's gaze drifted to the window. "Mr. Reginald Hawthorne owns half the moor. Wants to buy farms, build roads. Most won't sell and he don't like hearing no." As if on cue, the door burst open, and Reginald Hawthorne strode in, his riding coat mud-streaked, his angular face etched with irritation. The room stilled, all eyes on him as he marched to our table. "Mr. Holmes," he snapped, yanking off his gloves with a crisp snap. "I hear you've been sniffing around the farms. Found anything to kill this werewolf rot?" Holmes met his stare calmly. "The signs point to a human hand, Mr. Hawthorne masked with skill. How have these deaths altered your plans for Whitmore?" Hawthorne's mouth tightened. "Some widows are softer on selling now, I'll admit. Fear breaks stubbornness. But if you're hinting I'm involved, you're dead wrong. I don't need murder. My terms are fair." "Yet the timing favors you," Holmes said smoothly. "3 holdouts, dead, their lands ripe for the taking." Hawthorne's grip clenched his riding crop, and he slapped his gloves against his thigh with a sharp crack. "Ask Mrs. Drake. She'll tell you I was there the next morning, offering help. I have no hand in this." Holmes's eyes held steady. "Your kindness is noted, Mr. Hawthorne. We'll confirm it naturally." Hawthorne huffed and stormed out, leaving a tense hush behind. I mulled his words as we stepped into the drizzle, the villagers' wary glances trailing us like spectres. Many a man has woven a noose from his own pride. Watson, Holmes murmured, his voice tinged with quiet reflection. The afternoon saw us questioning villagers bold enough to face the day. A weathered shepherd, propped on a crooked staff, recalled a sharp whistle on the wind the night Carter died. A washerwoman, hands chapped from cold, swore she'd seen a hulking shape near the moor's edge, shrouded in shadow. Each story thickened the air with dread. But Holmes listened with cool detachment, scribbling in his notebook. As dusk settled, we stood at the village's rim, peering into the moor. Fog had thickened, devouring the distance, and a heavy silence pressed down. Then a low growl rumbled from the haze, not the howl we'd known, but a guttural snarl that chilled my blood. It rolled through the fog like a predator's breath, laden with menace. The air turned frigid, as if the moor itself shrank back. Holmes's hand steadied my arm. "Hear that, Watson? No wind or beast made that sound. Tomorrow night we'll be prepared." "What's your plan?" I asked, heart racing. His eyes glinted in the dimming light. "The full moon rises on with it, a shot at unmasking this shadow. There's a pattern, a rhythm, and I'm starting to catch its beat." He turned toward the inn, leaving me to follow, my thoughts swirling with the night ahead. The night of the full moon descended upon the moor with a stillness that seemed almost alive. The air, heavy with an unspoken promise, held a thin veil of fog clinging to the ground, parting only slightly under the silver glow of the moon, which hung low and full above the rugged hills. Sherlock Holmes and I had spent the day in meticulous preparation, our words few, our actions precise, though we both sensed the gravity of the hours ahead. Our chosen outpost was a low rise overlooking the farmstead of Mrs. Elena Smith, where the first savage attack had occurred. The barn loomed in the moonlight, its broken door a shadowed wound, while the fields stretched empty beyond. The sheep, wisely, had been gathered nearer the village. Holmes had selected this spot with his usual foresight, surmising that the perpetrator, be it man or myth, might revisit the site of its initial triumph, as the distant church clock told 11. We took up our positions behind a thicket of gorse. The prickly branches offered scant comfort against the creeping chill. Holmes's eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed upon the barn, while I gripped my revolver, its cold steel, a tangible anchor amid the night's uncertainties. "Watson," he murmured, his voice a mere breath, "our purpose tonight is observation, not engagement. Whatever emerges, we must let it reveal itself fully before we act." I inclined my head in agreement. though my pulse quickened with every passing minute. The moor whispered around us, the wind stirring the heather, a sheep's faint cry, an owl's mournful call, but beneath these sounds lay a profound silence, as if the earth itself awaited some dread event. Time dragged on. The moon traced its slow arc across the sky, casting shadows that twisted like spectres. My legs ached from the cold and stillness, yet I dared not move lest I disrupt Holmes's vigil. He remained motionless, a sentinel carved from the night. Itself then, as the clock struck 1, a sound shattered the quieter, low, menacing growl, the same unearthly noise we had heard the previous evening. It rolled from the moor's edge, closer now, and sent an involuntary shudder through me. I glanced at Holmes, but he silenced me with a raised finger, his gaze intensifying. A figure emerged from the darkness, moving with measured steps. Tall and cloaked, its form was shrouded in heavy fabric, and in its hand gleamed an object that caught the moonlight, a blade, perhaps, or a tool. My breath hitched as it approached the barn, pausing at the entrance as if attuned to some unseen signal. Holmes's grip tightened on my arm. Urging restraint, the figure lingered, then slipped, inside, swallowed by the barn's shadows. We waited. The moment stretched taut until a faint noise reached us, metal scraping wood, or straw shifting underfoot. Without warning, a shrill whistle pierced the air, and the figure erupted from the barn, fleeing toward the moor with startling agility. At the same instant, a second shape lunged from the darkness, hulking, hound-like beast, its eyes aglow with wild intent. As it gave chase, Holmes leaped up, his voice a hushed command. "Follow, Watson, but keep back. Let them lead us." We dashed across the field, the uneven ground jarring beneath our feet, but the fog had already claimed our quarry. The moor unfolded before us, a maze of paths and treacherous mires, and I feared they were lost. Yet Holmes veered left with unerring instinct, tracking a faint trail past a grove of gnarled trees. "There," he whispered, pointing through the mist. Ahead, the cloaked figure faltered, stumbling as though spent. The hound snapped at its heels, but as we closed in, the scene defied expectation. The figure whirled, brandishing a cudgel, and struck the beast with a frantic blow. The hound yelped, recoiling, and the figure seized its chance, vanishing over. "Arise," Holmes slowed, his breath steady despite our pursuit. "Curious," he said softly, "the pursuer becomes the prey." Before I could reply, a man's voice rang out, coarse and furious, from beyond the rise. We crept forward, crouching low until we peered into a shallow hollow. There stood the cloaked figure, now unmasked by the moonlight, a burly man, his face twisted in rage. The hound lay at his feet, whining, its side bloodied from the cudgel's strike. "Blast you, Hawthorne," he snarled, kicking the dirt. "You'll ruin this, you and your damned curse." He bent to the hound, inspecting its wound, then whistled sharply. The beast rose, limping after him as he stormed off into the night. We held our ground until he was gone, then retraced our path to the barn. The encounter had been brief, yet it had upended my understanding of the case. "What was that, Holmes?" I asked, my mind reeling. "The werewolf, its master." "Neither Holy One nor the other, Watson," he replied, his tone pensive. "We have glimpsed a fragment of the truth, but it is not what we anticipated. That man was no supernatural fiend, nor was the hound. Yet their presence here is no mere chance." Inside the barn, Holmes lit his lantern, casting light across the disturbed straw. Near the back wall, he stooped and retrieved a small object, a scrap of blood-stained cloth. half hidden in the dirt. Intriguing, he said, pocketing it. This was not here earlier today. But the man and his hound, I pressed. And his curse against Hawthorne, does it point to his guilt? Holmes shook his head. Rather, it hints at a broader scheme. That fellow was likely a poacher. The hound, his trained companion. The whistle we heard was a recall. But his flight from the barn and the hound's pursuit suggests he was startled by something within. By what? I asked, scanning the empty space. That remains unclear, Watson. Let us return to the inn and reflect. Tomorrow I shall seek Mr. Reginald Hawthorne's perspective on, perhaps, Tom Griggs's, whose brother's name lingers in this affair. The moor seemed to tighten around us as we walked back to the Wolf's Head, its mysteries multiplying. The night had offered a fleeting revelation, yet the heart of the danger eluded us. As we entered the inn, a distant halcanine or otherwise drift across the landscape, a haunting note that promised more secrets yet to unfold. The moor lay shrouded in a dawn mist, its bleak expanse pierced by the faint light of morning. The fog clung to the gorse and heather, dampening our coats as Sherlock Holmes and I trudged back to the Wolf's Head in after a fruitless night on the moor. The scent of wet earth hung heavy in the air, and a night bird's mournful cry echoed faintly, sharpening the eerie stillness. My nerves were taut from the previous night's events, the cloaked figure fleeing the Smith barn, the hound's savage lunge, the curse hissed against Reginald Hawthorne. Yet Holmes's keen eyes betrayed no fatiguingly the spark of a mind at work. We breakfasted in the inn's deserted common room, the silence broken only by the clink of cutlery. Mr. Billings, the innkeeper, hovered nearby, his glances betraying unease. Holmes finished his tea and leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The poacher we met last night holds the thread we must unravel, Watson, he said at last. He is no architect of this scheme, but a tool in its execution. We must locate him. But the moor is vast, I protested. He vanished into it like a wraith. Holmes's lips curved faintly. A man of his ilk seeks comfort in routine. He will retreat to the tavern or his hovel. Let us be about it. Our quarry was soon found in a dilapidated cottage near Widmore, framed by gnarled oaks. The poacher, burly, unshaven figures stood in the doorway, his hound at his feet, its flank bandaged from our encounter. His scowl deepened as we approached. "What do you want?" he demanded, gripping the frame. "Answers," Holmes replied smoothly. "We saw you at the Smith barn last night. Your purpose there interests me greatly." "I were just walking," the man growled, though his eyes flickered. "A cudgel and a hound." Holmes's tone remained mild. "You were paid to stage a disturbance, were you not?" The poacher's defiance wavered. "Arger man gave me a sovereign to make a racket in the barn. Called it a lark, but that growl set me running. Weren't." "No lark. Who was he?" Holmes pressed. "Don't know his name. Met him at the tavern. Rough bloke. Limped a bit. Hands like a grinder. Said he'd pay if I stirred trouble, and whistled for the hound." Holmes nodded. "And this whistled, did it have a distinct pattern?" "Sharp 2 notes. The poacher muttered, "But I ain't going back." "Thank you," Holmes said, pressing a shilling into his palm. "You've been most helpful." As we left, I ventured, the limp and rough Hans Thomas Griggs, perhaps. "A hypothesis worth testing," Holmes replied. "But we need more." We next sought Griggs at his cottage, near the village forge. The door stood ajar, revealing a wiry man with a pinched face, hunched over a workbench littered with tools and cloth scraps. He glared as we entered, his hands pausing on a hammer. "Mr. Griggs," Holmes began, "I'm Sherlock Holmes, and this is Dr. Watson. We investigate the Moorland troubles. You were let go by John Carter before his demise, I believe." Griggs's jaw clenched. "He cheated me out of fair wages, but I didn't touch him." Holmes's gaze roamed the room, settling on a notched chisel. "Your tools are well used. Do you often mark them so distinctively?" "Old habits," Griggs snapped, snatching the chisel away. "What's it to you and your limp?" Holmes continued, unperturbed. "An old injury cart accident." "Years ago," Griggs muttered. "Interesting," Holmes said. "Good day." Outside, I whispered, "That chisel, its notch matches the barn doors, marked precisely, Watson." Holmes replied, "And the cloth scraps mirror our earlier find. Yet we must be certain." That afternoon, we approached Edward Bennett, a sturdy farmer who had also dismissed Griggs. We found him by his pasture, repairing a fence. "Double quotes, Mr. Bennett," Holmes said. "You may be the next target. The culprit strikes those who wronged him. Will you aid us in a trap tonight? You'll appear alone in your barn. We'll wait nearby with the constable." Bennett's face paled, but he nodded. "If it stops this terror rhyme in dusk," draped the moor in shadow. The air thickened with the musk of damp earth and the distant howl of a wolf. Holmes, Constable Harris, and I hid among trees overlooking Bennett's barn, where a lantern's glow flickered through the slats. The fog thickened, veiling the moon, and the night grew taut with expectation. "He'll come," Holmes murmured, eyes locked on the path. "His grudge against Bennett seals it." The hours dragged, my limbs numbed by the chill. Then, at 11 o'clock, a limping figure emerged from the gloom. Thomas Griggs, whistle in one hand, a blade in the other. He blew a sharp two-note, and a massive hound bounded from the moor, eyes aglow. "Now," Holmes barked. We charged. Griggs spun, his face a mask of rage, but Harris seized him swiftly. Inside the barn, Bennett's shouts mingled with the hound's snarls. Holmes burst in, seizing a rope and looping it around the beast's neck. I hauled it back as it thrashed, while Holmes soothed it with steady words until it stilled. Outside, Griggs spat, "You've got nothing." Holmes faced him, voice cutting. "Your vengeance, Mr. Griggs, was as crude as your tools, both destined to be uncovered by reason's light. The notch, chisel, the whistle, the oil on your claws betray you." Griggs sagged, muttering, "They had it coming. Treated me like filth, and the murders." Holmes asked icily. Griggs fell silent, his guilt plain. As Harris took Griggs away, Bennett emerged, shaken but grateful. Later, by the inn's fire, I pressed Holmes. "The poacher the curser hired distraction," Holmes replied, puffing his pipe. "The curse was a ruse to frame Hawthorne. Griggs trained the hound with that whistle, a cruel puppet, and the oil scent from his tools, a less clue." I said, "The Moorland werewolf was no legend, but a man undone by bitterness. A tale ended not in howls, but in the quiet triumph of deduction." Dawn broke over Whitmore with a crystalline chill. The fog parted to unveil a moor stark beneath. The rising sun, the terror that had shadowed the village, seemed to wane with the light, though a restless hum lingered. Sherlock Holmes and I readied ourselves for the day's final reckoning. The trap of the previous night, Thomas Griggs caught, his hound subdued, had brought us near the end. Yet Holmes's keen mind sought to knot every loose strand. We took a swift breakfast at the Wolf's Head. The common room buzzed with murmurs of relief. Mr. Billings approached, eyes wide, Is it true, sir, the fiend's taken? Indeed, Holmes said, finishing his tea. But we must confront Mr. Reginald Hawthorne to close this chapter. Griggs confessed, I said, puzzled. What more has Hawthorne to offer? Holmes's gaze sharpened. He is the shadow cast by this crime, Watson. If not its hand, his role demands clarity. Hawthorne's estate loomed on the moor's fringe's stern edifice of stone, with windows glaring down like unblinking eyes. A footman's servant led us to a study lined with oak and adorned with hunting trophy stags and foxes staring through glass. Hawthorne stood by the hearth, his riding coat slung aside, his angular face taut as he turned. Mr. Holmes, he snapped, slapping his gloves against his thigh with a sharp crack. You've nabbed your villain, I hear. Why darken my door now? Holmes settled into a chair, unruffled. Thomas Griggs is in custody, the true werewolf of Whitmore. Yet your name echoes through this tale, Mr. Hawthorne, and I would have your account. Hawthorne's jaw tightened. I've no blood on my hands. I offered fair coin for those lands. Ask anyone. Yet the deaths aligned with your desires, Holmes said coolly. 3 who spurned you lie dead their widows, now tempted by your gold. A striking happenstance. Hawthorne's grip on his gloves faltered. His eyes flicked to a stag's head. Carter cursed me once, said I'd bleed the land dry. But I was here, Holmes. My servants will swear it. Ambition breeds chaos, Mr. Hawthorne, Holmes replied. And you reaped its harvest, though not by your hand. Griggs, wronged by Carter and Bennett, turned his spite to murder. He trained a hound, forged claws, and stoked the werewolf legend to terrify the village. Your scar found bloodied was his bait to ensnare you. Hawthorne sank into a chair, his voice low. Lost it weeks back. Thought the wind took it. Griggs did, Holmes said. He hired a poacher to deepen the panic, cursing your name to seal the ruse. Your greed fed his scheme, sir. Even if you wielded no blade. Hawthorne stared into the flames. I pushed harder when fear struck, thought it my chance. But never, Holmes. Nodded. The law clears you, but the village may not mend. What you've strained in, their faith might return. Hawthorne gave a tight nod. Chastened as we walked back to Whitmore, the village stirred. Smoke curled from chimneys, and weary faces peered out, tasting freedom at the inn. Constable Harris, Mrs. Smith, and a knot of villagers awaited us. The sun breached the clouds, gilding the moor, and a child's laugher sound, long lost. Out Holmes faced them by the hearth. The moorland werewolf is no more. Thomas Griggs, fueled by vengeance, slew Carter, Drake, and Smith. His hound and claws, guided by a notched chisel and oil-stained tools, played the beast. His whistle, its leash. Billings spoke up. So the beast were just a man, sir, indeed. Holmes said. He framed Mr. Hawthorne with a stolen scarf, using a poacher to stoke fear. Greed and spite not, legend birthed this horror. Mrs. Smith clasped his hand, tears welling. Henry can rest now. He'd have thanked you himself. Holmes bowed his head. Justice suffices, madam. That afternoon we boarded the train. To London, the moor faded behind us as fields blurred past. I turned to Holmes. The oil, the chisel, such trifles solved it. He lit his pipe, eyes softening briefly. A rare victory, Watson. Reason over ruin. Man's basest urges weave the darkest legends, yet they unravel under scrutiny. I settled back. The case's shadows lifted, leaving only the quiet triumph of Holmes's relentless mind, I trust, you found some measure of satisfaction in the curse of the Moorland Beast, a tale of shadowed moors and darker hearts, penned by my own hand from the chronicles of Mr. Sherlock Holmes. It is a sobering reminder, is it not, that the truest monsters often wear a human guise, lurking not in legend, but in the frailties of our nature. Should you wish to lend your support to these humble recordings, pray consider joining our modest fellowship through this channel's membership scheme. For a small subscription, you might claim badges of loyalty, early glimpses of our tales, 2 additional narratives each month, and even a quarterly volume crafted with care and adorned with exclusive sketches. If such an arrangement suits not your inclination, there exists a means to offer a single gesture of kindness via a page called Buy Me a Coffee. The particulars lie below. Every shilling, however trifling, aids us in bringing forth more of these curious and instructive accounts. I thank you heartily for your company. Your goodwill sustains this endeavor, and we shall soon return with another adventure to stir the mind. Until that hour, keep a weather eye open, for the most perilous shadows may dwell closer than you think.